What's good, everybody, and welcome to Andromeda, where creators, innovators, collectors, and dummies come to explore the world of NFTs with Kev. And today we have a very special guest. We have ZeroG, who is a historical vintage NFT collector who's been around in the space since, I believe, January in the NFT space, but been in crypto well before that. So without further ado, ZeroG, can you give a little background about who you are, when you started NFTs, and what you do?
Yeah, sure. So my background with crypto really started with my first purchase in 2012. I got a tiny amount of a few coins back then. So I'd been a holder since then. Over the years I'd come across Larva Labs, CryptoPunks a couple times, and I saw their page for sale. I was like, well, those are cool, but I didn't really understand why I should spend 500 or 1,000 or whatever it was at the time when I came across them before. But something really pulled me to take a look again in January of this year. And again, I knew I didn't understand really what this was all about. So I jumped in their Discord. And for a good couple of weeks, maybe even a month, I was lurking and really paying attention to some of these really smart cats that were very generous in terms of sharing their perspectives. They had a much longer history in terms of like their background is more akin to like translates over. It's like they were, WoW players, people that played RuneScape and were familiar with these virtual economies and virtual tokens. So guys like Deez and Mr. 703, they really communicated their vision for and value proposition for CryptoPunks in general, specifically, I should say, which I thought was, once I heard them out, they sold me on it. And I was willing to, this was my first NFT I purchased. That was a really big leap for me.
So, just so I understand and we get a clear understanding. So you purchased your first CryptoPunk back in January 2020. You heard about it a little bit beforehand. And the reason you kind of wanted to dive into this because you mentioned a couple guys explained the economics of it, kind of like RuneScape and all these other online games.
Well, let me clarify a little bit and expand a bit. So I purchased mine in January of this year, so January of 2021, and that's when I got into it. But what Deez and Mr. 703 were really explaining is back then the notion was that CryptoPunks were considered at that time by these people as the first NFTs, at least on Ethereum. That was one of the big things that sold me, but they also were communicating the value that these could have on a longer term in terms of the digital scarcity and the appeal long term throughout the crypto community. I saw that, and when I really thought about it and I saw their perspective and where they saw things were going, I tended to agree that there was a decent chance that CryptoPunks, for their historical value, but also because I also thought that their art was really cool too, I thought they stood a good chance of becoming much more sought after and recognized long term. So that was really the narrative that got me to jump in and kind of take that gamble. Yeah, they were really the other thing that the CryptoPunks Discord back then was really good about is keeping a friendly vibe and also trying to keep scammers to a minimum. So it was a really good introduction to the NFT space. And I have to really give a lot of credit to these guys. These guys were banging the drum about buying squiggles when those were just coming out, and they were so ahead of the game on a lot of this stuff. So
that's beautiful to hear, to see how much, and I want to talk about that because that was back in January of 2021. And here we are at the end of the year in December 21. How much has that NFT space transformed in this past year since you were there since the beginning of the year?
Yeah, it's really amazing. We've seen the emergence and the maturation, I should, to an extent, of the vintage NFT space. So starting in January, like I said, it was largely considered that CryptoPunks were the first NFTs, at least on ETH. And since then, we've had these just a series of rediscoveries and unearthings of these vintage NFT projects that have really added a lot more flavor and context to the history of Ethereum and crypto in general. So I think it's been really fun to watch that play out. I mean, there's some fascinating projects that have been unearthed. It's really cool stuff. It's fascinating. I think the vintage space in particular is where I see it's like the easiest value play long term because of some of those properties, and we can get into that later.
Yeah, and since we're on it, we might as well get into it. And I have two things I want to say. You said in the recent article I read that you did, you said you believe that these vintage NFTs will become one of the most valuable assets in the world. And
oh, yes.
I would want to know your opinion on that. And before we get to that, and I really curious to hear what you have to say, because there's been a lot of FUD on Twitter, at least on my timeline, about people fudding punks, people fudding curio, and saying there's no utility and it won't last and it's going to get flipped by the apes. And so I want to hear what's your opinion on that and why you feel like these assets will be one of the best in the world in the coming years.
Yeah, sure. So I guess the FUD is it's unfortunate to see this occurring. I mean, regardless of whether or not you like the art, you have to respect some of what Larva Labs was able to accomplish with CryptoPunks and also with autoglyphs. Those are amazing projects. But what's sad though is that there doesn't need to be tribalism. One of the beautiful parts of crypto is that we're moving away from a win-lose to we really can have a win-win-win. There doesn't need to be tribalism, and just because apes do well doesn't mean that punks do worse or lose. They can both do well. I mean, I nearly got apes when those came out, and I passed. Of course I'm kicking myself, but I thought some of the art looked cool. There's no if they surpass and flip punks, I mean, more power to them. Again, there's room for so many projects and so many specialties in the space. I'd like to see a little bit more maturity on that end, right? But to speak to why I think some of these vintage NFTs are going to be by far some of the most valuable properties in the world. I think what we're witnessing right now, since 2008, I would say was probably the tipping point. But we're witnessing a global revolution towards decentralization, spawned by a growing awareness that the existing power structures and economic structures are not operating in the public benefit. With the rise of crypto, we have the rise of crypto billionaires and millionaires. So, for example, a lot of the conversation in NFT space is about floors and price, and scarcity. But there's another aspect to why some people are buying, myself including for some of these, is that it's they're buying some of these vintage NFTs is really like having a token or a representation and appreciation of crypto itself. So, example, we had Taylor Gehring, I believe is his name, is one of the Ethereum developers. I read about him in that The Infinite Machine recently. So when you look at someone who buys like an original Ethereum developer who buys, I haven't confirmed this, but this is my suspicion, is that him buying a full set of curio cards is not based on profit. Like, he bought a full set of curio cards as a way of him having a token of just how important and how far his like the project he worked on has come, right? And a recognition of that history. So I suspect people like Taylor are not. If I offer him twice what he paid, why would he sell? He didn't buy to sell. I didn't buy my punk to sell it. I bought it because I didn't want to be priced out. And I think so Taylor is one example, but we have a growing population of crypto native millionaires and billionaires. So as this grows, like Justin Sun and all these like Sam from FTX, they can buy pretty much whatever they want. If they choose to if they see value in these assets, they whip out their checkbook, so to speak, virtually speaking, and they'll buy it and it'll never hit the market again. So we have normal speculators that are still going to be in the market, but a lot of these especially the historic assets, I think are going to go, or the supply is going to evaporate as long-term people who are buying not for economic reasons, they're going to be draining the supply long-term slowly. So we're going to see supply shocks for some of the most significant assets.
Correct.
Yeah. So, for example, I think I could easily see some of the like the especially the highest end pieces, the scarcest, the most significant. I can see. I know it sounds crazy, but I can see the Nakamoto Pepe within 10 years going between 100 and 250 million dollars.
Wow.
I think it's yeah.
Bro, if that's correct, we're gonna clip that part of the podcast and it will be viral everywhere on social media. That's a pretty bold
it
prediction.
is, yeah. But I truly believe it. It's not, I'm not pumping my bag with that. It's because I don't intend to sell unless there's a problem with Ethereum or Bitcoin. That's, that's diamond hands. So.
Wow. What inspired you getting the Nakamoto Pepe?
One thing I learned through my, through the years is when I've had an intuition a few times that I've ignored. Like the first time I ignored that was when I read an article about people mining Bitcoin. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And I ignored, I had that feeling, but I ignored it. Right. So, to my regret. Right. Yeah. But so I've had that feeling a few times. And what I've learned is to trust that. So the next time I had that feeling was with that CryptoPunk. I just had this feeling like, if I don't act like now, I'm not going to have this opportunity any longer. So that's what, it was a big gamble for me to buy a CryptoPunk for 9F. It was a big deal. Like, I've never bought an NFT before, and I just dropped, at the time that's like $15,000 on a picture. It's like, my thought at the time was because I believe I had conviction based on kind of like some of this outlook that I'd gathered from those cats is that I thought this was going to work out, but on the flip side, it was either going to be really smart or it's going to be really dumb. But I was okay with that because I had that feeling. I was willing to take that risk. And I had that same feeling with curio cards at a certain point after one of the first bull runs started. I had that feeling that I didn't have enough crypto to pick up a full set, but I had that feeling like if I don't move now, I'm not going to have another opportunity. So I picked up the rarest issuance in the set. I was able to get the 26. So I did that. That was at the time I pushed in with all my F to buy that.
Wow.
So, and in a similar sense, I got that feeling about the Nakamoto after I ignored it for so long. I had kind of ignored rare Pepes, or I had seen them, but I didn't really dig into them. But the historical significance of rare Pepes as a distributed community art project, like when I finally got that, and then I understood, the Nakamoto being the genesis of that, I had that feeling about it. So I pushed in with everything and I bought it. So
love it. And it's going to pay off. And the way my response to that, a lot of what you said earlier as well about the assets is, we have to remember there's only about 800,000 unique wallets that own an NFT. So we're so early. Yeah. It's extremely early. So
that's a good point. That's the other macro factor I left out, I guess, is that like those were the points I brought up were kind of less talked about. But the other like huge one is that we're right at the cusp of onboarding a tremendous amount of users both into crypto and into NFTs. This is such a slam dunk, especially with these the historical NFTs that have scarce supply. I guess the other thing I again to counterplay the historical versus the modern projects, like there's essentially zero moat or zero opportunity cost to crank out 10,000 NFT collections. Mm-hmm. So it only makes sense that we're finally starting to see capitulation in buying demand because there's zero opportunity cost. You can crank them out all day long, 10,000, 100,000 at a time. And eventually, like we're seeing, these projects are finally stopping to sell out. And there's not enough, secondhand demand to prop up the supply. Yeah. But that's a great point. Can you imagine like with what we've seen this year, can you imagine in 2 years that we don't have triple or 5 times the number of people owning NFTs. I can't imagine that.
Yeah, I think 2020 and to go off of that, just if 2022 is going to be a massive year with platforms like Coinbase NFT.
Oh yeah,
going to onboard millions of new people. Twitter profile picture verifications. The head of Instagram just said that they're actively working on integrating NFTs with the platform. So we're going into in Shopify, the leading e-commerce platform is integrating NFTs with their platform. So we're going on to something, and we're going into a phase where it's going to be mainstream adoption. It's going to be, if you own a cell phone, you own some sort of NFT. Yeah. I think that's because every major social media business company is evolving and adapting to this new technology, this new way of life, which I find extremely interesting, and how we are so early. And a lot of time for floor prices on these historicals, I'm like, there's no point of even talking about it right now because it's so early in where we are. But what I do want to talk about is the project that I met you in. Was basically the carrier card Discord, which I believe to be personally extremely, extremely, extremely important to where we are today and where we will be in the future, because they are a peer project, the first art on Ethereum, but they are a project that was created, one of the first ones to really test the limits of this technology, one of the first ones to really give artists a chance. Publicly to sell their artwork. So I want to know, how do you feel about carrier cards, and where do you see that going in the next couple of years?
Yeah, sure. I'll give you, I guess, a little bit of backstory on how I got involved. So I was hanging out in the CryptoPunks Discord a lot earlier in the year, and when a lot of this NFT archaeology was going on, early stuff. So I heard about Mooncats, and I minted 11 Mooncats that I still hold. I mean, like, great stuff. Like, those are super cute, right? But I saw someone post a link to a Twitter thread by Harry BTC about, hey, there's this what appears to be the first NFT on Ethereum, and you can still claim them for basically a nominal amount. So I followed the instructions that, again, which is tremendous on Harry's part. And if we didn't have the wider distribution by having more people get into it, it could have really long-term damaged the project. But so he shared the instructions on how to access these. You couldn't use a web interface; you had to go through the smart contract directly in order to claim these. So I was able to follow his directions and claim a decent number of some of the common cards. I got around 100 of the floor cards at the time. Yeah, it was pretty amazing. I didn't own any Ethereum at the time, so I actually took a gamble and I drained my checking account to buy Ethereum on Coinbase. It was pretty funny, but that was another moment. I was like, "Am I crazy?" I was like, "Well, hey, worst comes to worst, I don't know. I'll live with the mistake, right?" So
love it. I love it. That's all of us, man.
Yeah, right. Totally aping in. So I took that gamble. So after that, some of the smart guys, they decided to put together a full collection. I was trying to only trade my commons for a full set. Like, a couple of people, no one wanted to trade at a decent exchange rate between the commons and the rare ones. So yeah, I put that off. But so I was sitting on those for a long time, and I was saying back then, I was like, why are these not more expensive? And I even was talking about them in the CryptoPunk Discord, and why are you guys not going insane over this? This predates punks. At the time, I think that was the first one that was known that predated CryptoPunks, and there just wasn't a lot of enthusiasm. I know it's not a PFP project, but kind of what I suspected is that this kind of interfered with the investment thesis, in part for CryptoPunks, because it predated them, and that was the narrative for a long time. So I just sat on them for months until we kind of had a resurgence in the in the vintage space. But what really led me to, so right now, I contribute what I can. I can write and do some other odds and ends for the project. But what really actually got me to, before I got in, and I bought as many of the cards that I could, and I got that 26. What really kicked me off is I saw an interview with Travis, one of the co-founders. Yeah. And I think I'm a pretty decent like now I'm pretty decent judge of people. And, I've also witnessed this through actions. Travis, like, he's one of those guys where, like, he just radiates integrity.
Yeah.
The crypto space back in 2017 was teeming with scammers. There's, I mean, so many abandoned rug projects. I mean, I like Travis, just his integrity and the way he carried himself, and he was talking about this, and I've seen it demonstrated through actions too. That made me really want to really get serious about curio cards. And so that's why I was really sold on it from then. And I'm still super bullish on it long term. It's an amazing project. Like you said, it's set a lot of technical firsts, using IPFS, like, again, one of the first ways to allow artists to sell directly in order to, monetize their art for funding, on Ethereum. It's a really rad project. And like you said, the community is really cool. To me, there's such an opportunity right now. I don't see how can you imagine in 3 years where Ethereum is even bigger, right? And we have like 5 times the adoption, even 3 times the adoption of crypto users and NFT collectors. How is like owning the first NFT art piece on Ethereum not going to be a like super coveted grail? I just can't see how that isn't a thing. So to me, it's a slam dunk. I know the prices have gone down, but that doesn't bother me. I think long term, it's such a solid hold for me personally.
Oh, and I agree. And I just seen a tweet earlier today where it said price dips are opportunities for more community members. And I think that is extremely important, especially for a lot of these assets. It's the more community members is super important, because when you look at curio cards, it's almost been growing every single day in new unique users since probably July-ish. Every single day new people are onboarding into this project, and I think that's super important because community is everything, in my opinion, when it comes to this early NFT space. And the more people you have advocating for your project, the more people you have marketing your project, the more people you have spreading awareness for your project, it's going to help your project do better in the long term, especially when you have people of integrity. So I think I'm not mad, or, I understand how markets work. Nothing goes up forever, but I do believe this dip in price has allowed so much people who originally would have been priced out from August prices to finally come in and grab a couple cards. And that's just how we'll continue to move forward. And hopefully these prices could elevate like this to where we get to above 5,000 unique holders in the very near future.
Yeah, I mean, well, I guess one thing that's helped me is having a longer term perspective. Is I've witnessed and gone through tremendous bulls and bears and held through the entire. I didn't like trade in and out. I held my stack throughout there was that early the early bull run up to like $600 or whatever in Bitcoin, and then it went down, and went up to 1,200, and then again that was down for years. And we had, if your thesis remains intact, and if you still have that conviction, then there's no need to worry about the price. If you believe people are going to continue collecting NFTs, why would this not be, like, again, one of the most clutch plays on Ethereum? It's amazing.
How do you feel about when people say these historicals should add utility? How does that make you feel?
Yeah, so they're applying kind of a modern NFT view, where part of how these modern projects they're having to differentiate themselves and get more participation is through, I wouldn't necessarily say gimmicks, but they have to have more things, right? That's really quite the opposite in historic NFTs, whichever NFT you're talking about. But for curio cards, why would you need a utility? The utility is actually the owning the NFT itself, right?
Yeah, owning
the value is the history and the provenance, which is unbroken because we're riding on top of crypto, right? Again, another advantage that this NFT space has versus the legacy art market is that we have cryptographically provable provenance, which it's a big deal. There's been so many scandals of fake paintings, and I don't know. It's so hard for a lot of these valuable artworks to 100% know that they were legit. So And that's something that we don't have to worry about in the NFT space.
Yeah, I love that. So I want to move forward a little bit
Yeah, sure.
and talk about other historicals.
Yeah.
What so how do you feel like this will go? Do you feel like every historical will, or vintage, I should say it's vintage because historical is a little bit different of a meaning, but do you feel like every vintage project will increase significantly in value? Or do you feel like some will obviously do better than others for various reasons? What's your take on that?
I think a lot of value will be driven towards historical firsts. I think those will by and large do better than the ones that came second in any particular area. But yeah, ultimately, I think the scarcity. I think that we're going to see, like, we're at the beginning edge of even of vintage NFT collectors. I think we'll see another wave or two of vintage NFT collectors come in, and I think they will sustain, if not increase, the value of most vintage projects that aren't terrible.
Yeah,
So yeah,
and I would even say the vintage NFT collector space is only going to continue to grow
yeah,
the older these NFTs get. In
yeah,
time is literally the best friend of
yeah,
vintage NFT collector. So, and I
yeah,
know we're thinking of terms of 3 to 5 years, but imagine in 50 years,
yeah,
when somebody says, I own a Nakamoto card, or I own a full set of curio cards, or a punk,
yeah,
um,
exactly.
yeah, I think,
Imagine,
yeah, go ahead.
I mean, imagine when we have, instead of 100 million, we have like 2 or 3 billion or 4 billion crypto users and like 2 billion NFT collectors. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. And I want to say this as well. You've gotten the hunch for punks. And
Mhm.
I meant to say this earlier. The hunch, what is the biggest hunch and the most promising, you would say, in your opinion? Would it be the punks? Would it be the cure cards? Um, how do you feel about the Ethereum projects? Which ones do you have the biggest hunch that will be the thing?
I think punks are still going to be relevant. I think a full set of curio cards. Again, like we're not. A lot of people aren't really understanding the scarcity in terms of the incoming wave of users. But a full set of curio cards is such. Again, there's a theoretical maximum of 105 full sets of curio cards. That's extremely scarce. I mean, for to having that's going to be a grail for sure. It already is, but I
Yeah.
mean, and there's a good possibility that there's not even it's not even possible to achieve that some of those wallets that have some of the rare cards are potentially lost. So we could be looking at a maximum of what, like 30 full
Yeah.
sets.
Yeah.
It's going to be an incredible grail long term. I think Pepe's it might take a while longer because there's still a stigma of like the perception of it being involved in like the alt-right stuff. So I think it'll take a while longer maybe for Pepe's to catch on. But yeah, for sure, I think again, I really love curio cards. Crypto Arte, I think is just so striking and distinct. I think and I really just think it's a cool project. Pixel Map, I really love a lot. I think there you have a decent shot of Ethereum being a huge play in the future too, just because of how early it is on Ethereum.
Yeah, I think collectors will definitely
Yeah,
own Ethereum. So ZeroG, what final words and thoughts do you want to leave us with?
I guess one thing I could say is that what I've learned is when you have an intuition or you have a gut feel about something, and you've done the research to back it up, is to not let yourself get shaken out by the day to day or even the week to week or month to month, years. If you still believe that and have that conviction, then move forward with it. And not financial advice, but if you feel that strongly about something, and it's a risk that you can live with losing, then this is. I think we're still in a time of historic opportunities in the space. Just an example of again the money that's going to be coming in. We just now have like people like Snoop Dogg and Jay-Z,
Yeah,
like just the first trailing edge of the boldest celebrities moving in as the moneyed class sees these celebrities rocking these vintage NFTs. I mean, they're going to ape in too, but they have
100%.
they have enormous bags. And again, with the scarcity of some of these projects, like once they really start moving in, the floor will be moved permanently, and
Yeah.
most of us will be priced out forever.
Well,
That's my belief. You know, when you're talking about the scarcity of, for example, in curio cards, where, you know, like the like 26, there's only 105 people in the world that can ever own that at the same time.
wow. Yeah.
Right. Then how many billionaires exist in the world? How many crypto billionaires exist now? I mean, where crypto billionaires and crypto millionaires it's only going to keep accelerating. It's such a slam dunk.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. So ZeroG, this was absolutely amazing. Thank you for your intake on the historicals, the vintage, and we really appreciate you. And with that being said, Andromeda tuning out.